In this video, we're going to see how we can take a Python function and turn it into a similar construct in Java known as a static method. So we've seen functions in Python. Here I've taken some conditional execution code that we saw in an earlier video and put it into a function called grade. Grade takes in a single input, but in theory it could have more than one or it could have none. So there's some number of inputs that are being passed in. And then this function is taking the value of AVG, using it to figure out the letter grade, and then it's returning that letter grade. Okay, so in Python, that would be a function. I'm assuming this is all the way over to the left-hand side of the file, so it's part of the global scope. But Python also has methods, which are functions that are inside objects. So let's imagine we have a class called rectangle, which is a blueprint for rectangle objects. We can have functions that end up inside those rectangle objects. In particular, we can have a function called underscore underscore init, which is used for creating the rectangle objects. It's the constructor. And we can also have one for figuring out the area of the rectangle. And what's important here is these are what Python calls methods, because they are functions that are inside an object. And what makes them methods is not just that they're indented under the class header, but that they also have a self parameter that gives us access to the internals of the object. In Java, both of these types of functions are called methods. Static methods are like functions in Python. They are not inside objects. And non-static methods are like Python methods. They are inside objects, and they're sometimes called instance methods instead. In this video, we're going to focus on static methods, which are the ones that are like Python functions. So here's our Python function again. Here is the corresponding Java static method. Because a method defines a block, we have curly braces around it, and then we have the method header. And the format of a static method header begins with public static usually. We're going to talk more about public in a later video. Then we have the keyword static. Static is what makes it a static method. We then need to specify the type of value that the method is returning. This is something we don't need to do in Python, but we do in Java. So here we're saying that this method is going to return a string object. We then have the name of the method, which in this case is grade, and then in parentheses we have the parameters or inputs. In Java, those variables have to be preceded by their type, just like we've seen elsewhere. So in Python, you just have the variable that you're using for the input. In Java, the variable has to be preceded by its type. And then this particular method is taking whatever the user gives for AVG, so that will be passed in when we call the method. It's using that value, which is assigned to AVG, to figure out what the appropriate letter grade is, and we looked at this code in the previous video. And then it's going to return the string that has been assigned to grade. Okay, so here we are back at the program from the previous video where everything was in the main method. We got the average from the user, we figured out the letter grade, and then we printed the letter grade. So now what we can do, and what we essentially have done in what I just showed you, is take this code here, which figures out the letter grade, and we've brought it into a separate static method. And this allows us to keep our code more readable. And so when you do this kind of thing, you say, well, I know I want to be able to break things up into smaller pieces, so let me go and create a separate method. And so you basically are just moving code up here that used to be in the main method. And then you say, okay, well, what do I need to pass in? Well, I need to know the average. So you go ahead and add that to your parameter list. And you say, what do I need to return? I need to return the letter grade. So you put a return statement in for that. You also put the return type up here. And again, grade is a string. So we are returning a string. Notice it's okay to have the same name for the method and the variable. You wouldn't need to do that, but we did that here and that's fine. And then down in the main method, because we're using that other method, we have to call it. And one place that we can do that is actually right here, right? So the name of the method is grade. So I'm going to take what used to be the variable grade and replace it with a call to that method. And I need to pass in the value that I got from the user, which is in the variable avg. And that calls the method. It passes in the user's input to my other method. That other method returns the letter grade. That return value replaces the method call, and we end up printing that letter grade. And we can see that that does indeed work by compiling it and running it. So let's say the average is 82. You can see that we get a letter grade of B. One final thing worth noting is that the main method is itself a static method, and we know that because we have the keyword static in its header. It does have some inputs, or at least potential inputs. We don't usually actually pass things into main, at least not if we're running programs from an IDE like this one. Later on we'll talk more about what exactly that is and where those inputs can come from. But for now, you just need to put that there in every main method. But then I want to call your attention to this word here. So the main method does not return anything. And whenever you have a method that doesn't return something, you need to use this special keyword void, and void indicates that nothing is being returned. So remember, this is where the return type goes. In our earlier method, we had string because we were returning a string, and because main returns nothing, we have to say void.